If you are living your life and speaking about your experiences based on someone else's comfort zone, you're letting them create your reality.
This is episode 10, a duo episode with myself and Naada, and today we're talking about getting deeper into the driver's seat of your own life, starting right now.
Your purpose is to live embodied, merging your consciousness and integrating it in the physical realm. That is the purpose of a human life, is to walk consciously on earth. And that's what all the spiritual teachers teach us. If you focus on the one thing that your life purpose is, that you came and you incarnated into a specific lineage, I believe your soul chose that lineage, and your purpose is to heal that lineage, all of the physical genetics, the mental and emotional aspects of that lineage. If you focus on that, the rest of itself will work itself out.
Welcome back to the Living on Purpose podcast, a place where we discuss the importance of purpose in our lives and connect with others that have created soul-aligned offerings that build into their own personal purpose. It's Catherine, and I'm so excited to be back with you guys after the last few episodes. We're going to wrap up the interviews for the winter season with this episode, and I'm really excited to have Naada on here for this last episode. It's just so perfectly aligned. Before we get started, please make sure to subscribe, rate, review for the Living on Purpose podcast. When you send me your screenshot of a review to Catherine@klzmethod.com, I will send you my KLZ Method workout for the chakras. Also, as you're listening, screenshot your favorite part and share it with us on Instagram at klz.method. I love hearing from you and sharing your thoughts and comments. I'm so grateful to you and all of our amazing listeners for helping us to grow the podcast and share its guests and message with more people. Without further ado, let's get right into this episode. All right, so we're here today with Naada. She has been called a manifesting wizard, a modern shaman, a life coach, an energy healer, a spiritual advisor, and a consciousness hacker. What she most identifies with is being a catalyst who opens people up to understanding and mastering how to work cooperatively with the unseen worlds, to live more powerful and fulfilling lives. Her greatest passion is igniting people into really living their purpose and passion. And we have Naada with us today.
Hi.
Thanks for being with us.
I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here. So some of you may know Naada from the Truth Liberation event that we put together. It was a virtual event that we did 2 Novembers ago. Can you believe it?
No.
It was a while ago.
I
it was a
cannot
good
believe
one.
that. That's right. Wow.
It's wild. We connected over the worldwide of internets through social media, right?
We did.
It was really interesting how she just dropped into my field, and she was talking about something that immediately aligned with something I had just been experiencing within an hour before that. And the powers of social media, or the algorithm gods. You told me this word, the algorithm gods.
No, I call them my AI spirit babies.
Yeah. And it's true. I mean, I look for signs in things all the time, and I feel like I get answers from different things. But when other people bring you those messages, and when they're right there as you're scrolling, it's just like, whoa. And so we just quickly, started voice messaging back and forth on Instagram. They're like, oh my gosh, we got to do a course together. We got to do this. And we've just become really good friends. I don't know what else to say. So I'm really glad to have you here. Can you tell us? So happy to share your background because it's so just rad. Can you share some of your background?
I can share. So I've been fascinated with consciousness for a really long time. I got my undergraduate degree in consciousness and human evolution at NYU at a wonderful school called Gallatin that is individualized study. So I have been on this journey for quite some time. And 2 synchronicities. I ended up meeting a man named Daniel Pinchbeck, who wrote a book called Breaking Open the Head, which was one of the first books that reintroduced plant medicines into Western society about 20 years ago. And he became a friend of mine, so I read his book, and I thought, okay, I gotta go do this ayahuasca medicine plant thing. And I was babysitting at the time in college for a family that gifted me a ticket to go anywhere I wanted in the world when I graduated. So as soon as I graduated, I flew off to Peru. I still actually was talking to my mother recently. She's like, I don't know how I actually allowed you to do all these things. Ended up on a plane, got in a smaller plane and ended up in the middle of the jungle and hoping they were going to actually show up and pick me up, or who they were, because there was barely any internet at all in the Amazon at that point in time. So I went and I sat with ayahuasca, and I have really, this is a short opening to, my experience of an obsession, I might say, with understanding consciousness, understanding what's really going on in the universe. And all of that stemmed from being absolutely miserable. I hit suicidal depression by 18, 19 years old. I was on the trajectory of going to an Ivy League school. I was about to become an All-American lacrosse player, and I blew my knee out in the first state game that I played and couldn't walk for months. So the lack of movement in my body, plus my mother wanting me to live a life path that was not aligned with my actual life path. And I learned, as they say in the South, bless her heart, doing the best that she could to try to coerce me into the model of what she thought success was always threatening to disown me from the family if I didn't go to an Ivy League school. So, I at that age sort of had my first mental breakdown of trying to fit into society and trying to make everyone happy. And it was not aligned with my soul path. And there's, this is a very loosely quoted, I'm going to reiterate an idea from a quote in the Gnostic texts. Not everyone knows what Gnosticism is, but we can think of Gnosticism as some of the teachings of Christianity and of Jesus that were preserved that did not make it into the Bible. And we might think of them as more of the Christian mystics. In their writings, it's said that Jesus basically said, again, loosely, that if we don't follow our soul, it will turn inside us and eat us alive. And that was very much my experience. Misdirected energy, the creative energy that we have, like it's not being directed, it becomes destructive. And a lot of times that's towards ourselves. And we see that in society with the rates of self-mutilation. I mean, now with like suicides, very unfortunately, especially with young kids, depression, all of that is a misdirection of energy. And so for me, I'm, a very unique being. I remember very clearly I could hear voices that nobody else heard. Well, at least my mother did not hear growing up. And she finally started to tell me, hey, who are you talking to? Mm-hmm. And I said, you don't hear those voices? And she said, no, those are your imagination. So my next question, well, what is imagination? Yeah. And my mom explained to me, that's not real. It's in your head. And so I remember very consciously the filtering process I went through as a child of filtering out my extrasensory perception so I could fit into reality. In order to do that, I had to start shutting down my energetic system. And it actually led to me getting a 3-pound tumor later on in life. Wow. So that same process of shutting down led me to be quite miserable. And I tried to take my life a few times around between, I'd say, I call it my dark night of the soul, from about 18 to 21. And every time I tried to kill myself, I can laugh about it now. I was miserable then. They wouldn't let me off the planet. We'll say they. Everyone uses the they. Who are the they? And in what context? My spirit guides, I would say, I could not successfully do it. I tried to throw myself off a building. Someone showed up out of nowhere and grabbed me. And it all culminated in me, trying to slip my wrist at some point in a bathroom and hearing this loud booming voice from a non-physical entity telling me I was not allowed to take my life because I had a purpose here. And I hated it. And I finally just acquiesced that I couldn't even be successful in getting off the planet. I was going to be stuck here on Earth, and I hated it. Wow. And that then was like, well, if I'm stuck here, I need to figure out how to do this in a way that works for me. And that's how I got into eventually getting my degree in consciousness and human evolution and starting to look and becoming like a true seeker for answers that were going to help me understand the human experience in a way that worked for me, because the society that I was born into, I did not fit into it. And it was making me sick, and that was manifesting first for me in suicidal depression and eventually in, like I said, growing a huge tumor in my body.
Wow. I
So
mean, thank you. We're going deep right off the bat. I really appreciate you sharing all of that. It's just so potent. And man, I can feel it. I'm like goosebumps everywhere.
yeah.
The thing that I think is really interesting too is that you shared about how you tried to shut it down.
Mm.
And I've been there myself. When there's two different ways I feel like you can try to shut it down, or what you learn is you can't, like you said. And then you have to learn how to focus it. You have to learn how to cultivate it and harness it and pull it in a different. It always reminds me of that scene from the Superman movie. I don't even know which Superman movie it is. I'm not like a big Superman fan, but I saw a Superman movie at
It's
some point
okay if
where
you like
he
Superman.
he was in the closet as a little boy because he just felt all these things and he could hear all these,
Oh.
he could hear all this stuff and it was just too much. And his earthly mom is trying to coax him out of the closet, just saying, listen just to the sound of my voice, just focus on one thing, because he heard so much of the noise. And I feel like that sometimes when it's just like, I can't take all this. Like you go into the grocery store and it's like, there's just so much energy from so many people.
Mm-hmm.
And most people maybe don't feel it. But if you're an empath, you feel so much of everyone's stuff and you almost want to get angry with them. Like, get your crap off me, Or for you, you're like, I don't want to hear this stuff. Just stop it. Just make it go away.
Well,
But you have to learn
I
how to.
wanted to hear the things. I didn't even realize it was weird. So I would, I mean, I was like playing with my friends. That's apparently nobody else, and it's not, look, almost every child, it's not by accident that we have a colloquialism, a reference to kids having invisible friends. Every single kid has an invisible friend, it's that we tell them it's fake. And we very quickly start to indoctrinize kids into what I would say is scientific materialism. Like when we start to understand consciousness, we want to look at, for me, I look at consciousness as like infinite energy, infinite information. That would make us explode. We wouldn't be able to have a human experience if we were infinite beings, right? We would actually be identified as the omnipotent, all-knowing, what many people refer to as God or source energy. So we have a process of refining and filtering information to become finite beings. And then the question is, what program are you filtering that infinite information to design your reality in the finite world? And most of it's done unconsciously. And many of us are now beginning to recognize, oh, wow, I can actually be consciously doing this. I mean, some people create very consciously and don't even realize that they're creating consciously as well, right? We all have seen what a powerful creator does. Some people just get a very clear vision and it just happens in the world, but they're not necessarily in the conversation of like, quote unquote, you can't see me, but I'm doing the quote fingers, manifesting in the spiritual sense, but they're doing that. So I would say that we all have these abilities and we have different types of abilities too, right? But we are all molded to fit into society, and that's part of our parents' jobs. I don't want to make that a bad thing, because you can't function, right? To be a functioning member of society, you have to understand the agreements of society and function within them. I think what's happening now, I know what's happening now, is that we are renegotiating the agreements of the societies that we've infused our consciousness into, really, right? And it's happening for a lot of people, especially since the pandemic. It kind of put a pause on this trance.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not against capitalism, but I will just say the capitalistic trance of productivity. I mean, if we want to go way back, we could say puritanistic trance. I mean, we could go back how far you want to go back and why we have the patterns that we have. But I can speak to growing up in America, who has, right now, of spreading Western culture and capitalism. It's very productivity based. And this could get us actually back, just to circle back to this idea of purpose, and something that I'd love to share, since I know that your podcast is about purpose. We've been very conditioned to believe that our value is based on our productivity because of the system that we've grown up in and the way that its value structures are aligned. And so, going to purpose, what I find is that many people say, what's my purpose? And we want to look at our language, because language is the first place that we can really start to see the programs of how we think and the stories we tell ourselves. And so one of the basic questions that we ask unconsciously over and over and over again is, what do you do? Hi, who are you? Oh, your name's so-and-so. Great. How, what do you do?
The second thing you want to know is, what's your name and what do you do with the majority of the hours in your day?
And so we've learned to identify with our title and our doingness, aka our productivity, with our value. And it's not working anymore. It's an outdated system. and it doesn't make it bad. I really love Ken Wilbur. He's a person that I read a lot of his content, and I don't have time to get into him, but he's awesome. A Brief History of Everything is a book you can check out. I know they did a film on him recently, which I have not had a moment to watch yet. He talks about systems. Mm-hmm. He's a deep thinker. He got into Harvard very early. I believe he left Harvard at 17 because he was just like done studying there and started to build his own branch of philosophy and psychology, just to give you an idea of how big of a thinker this guy is. He talks about systems, that systems are built to contain information, but at every given point, a system can no longer contain that information. So it starts to break down and a new system forms from that. And I feel like we're in that process right now.
Right.
The system has served us in the way that it has, and it's brought a lot of amazing gifts to us. We don't want to throw those out. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we're also starting to see where the system is not productive and actually starting to possibly cause our destruction.
Right.
And a lot of us see that now. So that, everyone's learning like, well, how do I figure out what to do with myself when I know the system? And I think that's actually the biggest cause of anxiety is actually normal, right? We are all treating anxiety and depression as a dysfunction, but it's actually a healthy, natural reaction to living in a system that's actually killing you. You should have anxiety.
Yes.
And then you're like, well, don't have this anxiety, take this pill, because nobody wants to have anxiety, but it's better to fix the problem to not have the anxiety than just close your eyes, pretend it's not happening, and numb yourself out.
Yeah.
So
I have to speak on that because I mean, this is just such a major indicator when people say, I had someone that I was talking to in the corporate space one time tell me, well, I don't have any spirit guides. I don't have any of those people. I don't feel those things. And I always say that the body's a high precision tool. It's giving you the signals. It's telling you the information. And so when you're receiving these signals as anxiety and depression, and then you're saying, I don't want this. I don't have time for this. I need to feel good all the time. It's like you're covering up the check oil light on your car and expecting that the car will continue to run in an optimal way. It's just not possible. So it's just
a great example.
It's a trip to have this body, but then really know what it's telling you and why it's telling you those things. It's just so important to know. I mean, of course, nobody wants to feel anxiety. It sucks. But like, why are you feeling anxiety? Can we go into that a little bit deeper? Because there's a message there. There's guidance there. There was guidance for you when you were suicidal. There's information that's telling you something, like you're saying, we aren't fitting into this old, antiquated system of our lives. We've outgrown our old parameters. And I love how you shared that with it being, the systems even in space. Like we do this with when we tune in with Kundalini, we say Ong Namo Guru Dev Namo. And what I understand, Ong is I get it wrong all the time, Ong or Om. One is the infinite and the other one is the entity that holds the infinite. So you have both, you have when I think of it as like saran wrap. Like you have the infinite universe stretching out and growing. But at some point it reaches beyond that plastic wrap that's holding it. And it needs to bust out. And that's where we are right now as a collective. We're breaking out of the old patterns and the old way of living. And it's not comfy and it doesn't look good or feel good, but we just need to transform and allow it and know that we aren't the container. We are the things in the container. We are that element in the plastic wrap.
Yeah. And we are actually also the container, right? Because there's like, we live in a holographic universe. So what that means is like, there's a bit of everything in everything, right? You can see the entire universe in a molecule or in an atom. So everything is a mirror of a mirror of a mirror, or, of each other. So when I say that we are also the vessel or the container, just to bring it down, because sometimes, look, I am a self-professed consciousness geek. I study stuff and you can totally geek out and have mental masturbation thinking about these things. It's not effective if you're not learning how to embody it. And the embodiment is the vessel. So when we understand that, and if we're choosing to be, and, part of living your life purpose could be, should you choose to accept the mission I'm giving you.
Yeah.
Is being heaven on earth. This is what all the high teachers speak about. Shambhala, depending on which tradition you're looking at, the enlightened society is when enough people embody in their physical vessel. So as we understand, we're not just spiritual beings, right? People say, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Yeah. You're here for the explicit purpose. So when this podcast is about purpose, what I was getting at with the conversation before, and kind of tie it back around, and please, I can go all to many different places. So if I don't answer something, just bring me back. But I think I got this one.
I think you got it.
We are used to the system we grew up in. Most of us made us identify with the title. I'm a lawyer. I'm a this, I'm a that. And we are so much more than that, our value. And so when we think about most people, when they're going around asking, what's my purpose? They're still in an outdated form of relating to the vastness and the incredible beings that we are as humans, trying to say, oh, well, my purpose is something of a job. Like
Simplify it, right?
Yeah, like my purpose is to be a doctor, or to be a nurse, or to be a this. Maybe they've expanded to the next level. And my purpose is to be of service, which is great. Your purpose is so much more vast than that. And I would say, and this is what I do say to most of my clients, to just kind of get it out of your system. In my opinion, and I will tell everyone here what your purpose is. Your purpose is to live embodied. You're merging your consciousness and integrating it in the physical realm. That is the purpose of a human life, is to walk consciousness consciously on earth. And that's what all the spiritual teachers teach us. And it is to truly, if you focus on the one thing that your life purpose is, that you came and you incarnated into a specific lineage. And I believe your soul chose that lineage, and your purpose is to heal that lineage, all of the coding and the physical genetics of that lineage, the mental and emotional aspects of that lineage. If you focus on that, the rest of itself will work itself out.
It maps itself out. It literally shows you where to go next, right?
Yes.
It is your map. I mean, it's your gene map, your gene coding, right? So it literally is there. It's wild. When I'm saying the example about, the plastic wrap around the universe, which is probably the worst description ever, but we're going to go with it. You are more than the container. You are the things that are that you are the essence within that. And then your point is, but you're also the container. It's interesting because you just can go so many layers into it, where it's like, I'm not the container. I feel like is the ego, right? We are not our ego, but yet we kind of are. Like we are, because
Definitely
you're all of it, right? Like, yeah. So it's just a trip, because as soon as you try to, and I think that this is very human of us to want to put it in some kind of organized, put a bow on it. I got it. Let's go. And that's just never going to be the thing. As soon as you know your purpose, it's going to change, because you are constantly growing. It's just going to be what it is. So you've got to be comfortable with that idea.
Yes. And I'm pausing because I listened to your last podcast, and I really want to say something about Tantra right now. So Tantra is what happened when we look back at the history of people figuring out who and what we are. There was a very long time of asceticism. Asceticism is the practice of escaping the body. So if you look at like fasting, or if you go to India and you see these, sadhus that are holding their arm up for like 5 years and showing how they can overcome the body. Asceticism is the practice of escaping or transcending the body to recognize your divinity. And Tantra, which is a feminine form of spirituality, is recognizing that everything is divine. The physical is just as divine as the non-physical. And it's not about, you can find the divine through any path, because everything actually is divine in my experience. Tantra was saying, well, let's not, instead of trying to get away from the body and hating this existence here, what if we actually recognize that the body is this incredible vehicle and just as divine as all the non-physical divinity that everyone's worshiping, and use it in our polarity of understanding our divinity. And
that's awesome.
That container gets thrown out a lot. So you're both, right? If we accept that everything is divine, you are a infinite, vast consciousness that is beyond your human comprehension. And simultaneously, you are a human in a body living on earth and using her 5 elements, to have a vessel that's this physical thing that allows you to walk as part of the earth experience on earth, borrowing her mater, which is mother in Latin, the mater of your mother earth, to be a child of earth for a period of time while you are simultaneously an infinite being of consciousness.
I love it. The polarity between the two is so cool, and it's just everywhere. I mean, in the audience, you can see why conversations with Naada, like we'll just get on the phone and have hours long of discussions, I have to be in the car or something like that because we need the time and the space. Like a 20-minute conversation is just not going to do it because there's so many layers, and it's so fun to like go into this and just really pull all the different, whatever we might be talking about, if it's something that we're going through in life or if it's something that we're just riffing on or whatever. It's just so cool to see all the different layers and but also this, but what about this? And how about that? Because there's not going to be one solid answer or something like that. There's just so much more, and it's so cool. There's so much more depth and availability and opportunity in it. It's so awesome.
Yeah. So I want to come back around because one of the things that I was thinking when you were talking about the logical aspect and how everything's always changing. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's a quote that came from someone at some time, which is the more you know you don't know. Mm-hmm. And when we think of humans, to just take some of these really vast concepts that can get a little bit out there and again, bring them back to the human embodied experience. Because what I'm passionate about is helping as many leaders be embodied. And when I say leadership, we are all leaders. You are leading, if no one else, you're at least leading your own life. Or you're not leading your own life. And if you're not leading your own life, somebody else is. And for sure they are, because the amount of technology right now that makes it possible for corporations or whoever has the resources to unconsciously influence you into different behavioral mechanisms is real. And we saw that with like the last few elections, and I definitely like The Great Hack is a film for people to watch if you want to understand that stuff. This is a whole nother subject, but I do want to speak to it because I'm interested in consciousness. So that means I'm interested in who's sculpting our consciousness as individuals and as society. So bringing it back to very simple terms, we're all familiar with a right brain and a left brain. And our left brain, we understand, is a logical brain. So we do have a tendency, it's not necessarily a human tendency. And I'm inviting people to really start using more empowered language. That's something I'm very passionate about. Mm-hmm. Those of us who grew up in this specific society, which is very reason and logic based in scientific materialism, where we've been taught like that the material world is more real than the non-material world, we have a certain way of existing because our society sculpted us that way. And so we are dominated by the left brain and logic because we believe it's more real and it makes more sense and it's more important. And we give accolades to those who have more intellectual competence versus maybe someone who has more kinesthetic competence. And we also have a right brain. So this is, again, we can also look at this as sort of, again, quote unquote, the feminine masculine rebalancing that's happening in our culture right now. The right brain is what's usually identified with the more feminine. It's the deep mystery. And it's the understanding that the more that we know, the more we don't know. We'll never know everything until we become God itself, source itself, which is such and in all the traditions, it's that which cannot be spoken of, right? Because you just can't grasp it with logic. So when we understand that, we're both of these things, we have a right brain, we have a left brain, and most of us who grew up in the West, for lack of a better word, we haven't been given the tools or taught how to navigate the right-brained aspect of existence, the understanding, nor have we been taught to validate that it's real.
Right. Well, so not to mention that just the life here is just culminated with so many other things that even if we were taught, we wouldn't have the time, right?
Well, to simplify it even more, like Gnosticism. So I talked about the Gnostics. Gnosticism means to know. So that's intuition, right? If we look at conventional society, if you had someone who said, even us before this discussion, you were sharing like, and you can see it happening right now. And it's very important that everyone has to use science to back up their spiritual, teachings. Mm-hmm. And that's great. But we are still so predominantly based on logic and reason that it's not real unless you can prove it to me with logic and science. Mm-hmm. It's just cutting out half, if not more, of the human experience. There used to be a time where you'd go to the Oracle of Delphi, and that was the most wise human, and all the leaders would go to her and she would channel, which is Gnosticism, like having the knowing, she wasn't Gnostic as in the Gnostic, people of mystic Christianity, but knowing through gnosis is intuition. And now people are starting to start relearning how to actually validate that. Hey, I might have read in this book that this is the best thing for my diet, but I'm really feeling that this is the best thing for me to eat. It can be that simple, but I won't listen to my intuition because I have been so conditioned to predominantly make logic the only thing that is right in my life. And
It's such a great description of like, just the eating, the food that we eat and all of that kind of stuff. And that's for so long in the last 20 years, we've all learned so many things about, don't eat meat, do eat meat. Oh, plant-based is terrible because, all the different things. And now it's coming back to, it feels like it's coming back to when there's that much information in your head, you're not going to solve it. You have your body, you've got to know. It's not going to be the same. We all have a different body. We all have different backgrounds. We've all had different experiences. We've been to different countries. Why would we have the same needs from a diet? So it's just one of, I think, the really cool ways that it's showing up in culture right now is the food thing, where everyone's just like, I don't even know what to do. I just want to not even eat, and never, oh, that's terrible for you too. It's really neat though to see it portrayed that way, exactly as you're saying. Yeah. Such a good description.
I know nobody can see the video. I'm just nodding my head here up and down like, yes, in full agreement. That's what I'd like to help people reconnect to is trusting themselves. Mm-hmm. And we've been so conditioned to go to a doctor. Like, I don't know what's going on with me. I need to go to a doctor to tell me. Mm-hmm. There are people, myself included, I sat Vipassana for 10 days. I'd highly recommend anyone that can take 10 days off and is interested in understanding themselves, go sit Vipassana. It's 10-day silent meditation. By the end of the 10 days, I could see all my internal organs through my mind's eye. I was readjusting my spine. I know numerous people have sat Vipassana. They elongated their spine, grew an inch or two. I know one person who totally repaired his knee sitting Vipassana for 10 days. Wow. And these are not, of course, we have to say, this is not a medical guarantee. And Vipassana is a meditation practice, not a medical, solution. Mm-hmm. The human mind has these capacities. We have not been trained, most of us, unless maybe we're in the military, how to use the mind. This is the truth of it, right? Like how most humans, maybe if I say, tell me about your mind or tell me about the anatomy of your mind, most humans would say, or at least in the West would say, I have a mind. I have a conscious mind. I have a subconscious mind. Maybe that's what they can tell you. That's it. And this is this vast tool that we have access to create, to receive information, to envision the new world through our mind. That this is what the capacity of the human mind is. It is the one thing that differentiates us from every other mammal and animal on this planet. And most of us have no clue what it is or how to use it. It's a serious waste.
So can we just jump in really quickly to what you've created on that exact topic?
I am working on self-promotion, and I advise us all to do the same. It's part of it. We've been taught to be small, and a lot of us have trauma around really glowing and shining our light. And I found at every level of bringing myself into the world and sharing, I've had to come against the ceiling and recalibrate my nervous system to a new way of being.
It's not comfy. But what you're building, it's so awesome. It has to be shouted.
Excited. Thank you. I am very excited about it, and I've worked my little tuchus off. It's called Empower, and it's a 3-month container that I've created. So I've had a one-on-one coaching practice for many, many years, and I love doing one-on-one coaching, and I wanted to be able to bring my work to a larger audience. So we do live in a time where we can create anything, and it's really beautiful. So what I created were 6 modules that are an online course in the container of doing one-on-one coaching with me. I titled it Empower because I'm passionate about people truly stepping and understanding who they are as a sovereign being and reclaiming their power. And it's a cool, simple title, Empower.
Yeah.
And so I go over a lot of the subjects that we're talking about. I break them down a bit more simplified, but truly understanding what is human anatomy, physical being, mental being, emotional being, energetic being, and understanding true self-responsibility, right? Truly being a sovereign being means taking responsibility for everything that you're creating in your life, as well as that can also be taking responsibility for your reactions to the things that are happening around you. Becoming a true master of self is being able to navigate the energetic charges of your nervous system, as opposed to letting other people pull you around. And that's through, work of healing our triggers so that we're not getting triggered anymore, so that we do become the masters of our domain on all those levels, physical, mental, emotional, and energetic. And it's a process. It's not going to necessarily, though I always hold space for instantaneous miracles happen in 3 months, but the container is designed to start introducing these ideas that have been lifelong practices for me, so that people can start seeding them into and start to pique their interest. And there's so much to explore, and we all are on different paths. But an overall container of the main snack bites that have allowed me to step out of traditional society and live an incredibly magical life and actually go through the process. I like to think of it almost as the Matrix. Of those of you who are Matrix fans, where Neo's like first asked, Morpheus says, like, jump over this building. He's like, are you crazy? And he does. He jumps and he falls on his face. And he's like, what are you talking about? See, I fell on my face, because it's terrifying to truly step into the place of faith that there is a higher intelligence that we have the capacity to be cooperative with and allow it to guide us. There's a level of surrendering, and it's a process of learning how to make that leap. And I'm there to hold people's hands through it. I've done it. I have full faith in it. And the more that we do it and we start to build that bridge of faith, all these beautiful things like the synchronicities that we were sharing earlier, finding amazing people, whether it's through Instagram or being brave enough to actually talk to someone on the street or in the supermarket that you feel called to, and finding out, oh, you do this, I do that. Nature is so highly intelligent and is in a proclivity towards being in her highest health, just like our bodies are, except we've just been taught to block it because we get embarrassed. Like, well, I don't want to talk to that person, even though I really do.
Or we don't expect it, I think, is one of the big things too. It's like, expect the miracles, expect that you are held, expect that you can jump over the building. I mean, it's a mind-blowing thing when you start to really, what I've experienced is when you finally get into these places where you no longer allow the programming to run your life and you step deeper into your intuition. And I'm oversimplifying it because I feel like that, there's a lot between there. But when you step into that and you start to see the real reality that was always available to you, it's like Alice in Wonderland. No, it's like Wizard of Oz when she clicks her heels, and it's like, it's always been there. You've always had it. When you start to step into it, it's just like, it blows your mind to realize everything that's available to you. And then once you start to even go beyond that and expect that it is that way. So there's some things that I've been working on lately. And when I come into them, it's like, I can't expect it in that area of my life because of the blockages, because of the ancestral limitations, because of the trauma, because of whatever reason. We all have it, right? And so when you go into those specific areas and you're like, no, I'm going to start expecting this here. I'm going to start and you make that almost your mantra. And then through that new lens, you recalibrate all of the trauma and all of the ancestral stuff to be able to shift your new reality to align with that, and you attract that vibration there. What's really, really amazing about how Naada does this course, I was able to get a sneak peek of the first module. And what's really amazing about how she's done this, and just her in general, is I think she knows how cool she is, because she's like one of the coolest people that I know. But what's really cool about how she does this is that she never acts like she's cool. She never acts like that you're here and that whatever's there. And I think maybe that's because a lot of us going through this, it's like, we're very humbled in moments, right? Like, you get to a certain point, you're like, I've got this. I'm the mamma jamma. I got this. And then you're like back on your knees on some other thing. You're like, oh man, why was I ever thinking this? So when you're really doing the work, you have that scope of being here and there at the same time almost. But what's really cool about how she does this module is, as she's doing it, this is stuff that she lives and breathes all the time. But her true essence really comes through, where you feel like you're really with someone that gets it right now. Not that got it one time and can speak on it from a high, mountaintop and say, these are the teachings and whatever, but you just really feel her essence come through in how she's sharing this. And this is just the pre-recorded module. The way that she shares this material is just very calm and slow and methodical. And you really feel held. I told you this when I listened to it. I just feel so held in the tempo that you have, because it's a lot of stuff. And even if it's something that you have understood previously on other topics, when you're bringing this to a topic that you're trying to move through that is sludgy and sticky and heavy, you need to go that slow. And you really just usher that through in such a beautiful way so that people can be in that birth and not feel rushed. So, I mean, I really
I'm
encourage
honored.
you guys to check it. Oh man,
Thank you. It's really
such a
means a lot to
masterpiece.
me. I've worked so hard on this, and I had no idea how long it was going to take me. I thought it would be done in 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh, let me put these little anime characters in. And then 40 hours later, I'm like, why did I do that? Now I have to make all the modules that way.
You're so funny. It's been so fun watching you build this thing because we've been building things on our own things separately. We'll touch base and say, hey, how's it going? I'm like, oh my God, I'm stuck in this place. Like, can you just look at it or whatever? It's really just been a cool.
I want to shout you out. You are such an inspiration to me in the way that you create and as a mother and how you show up. It blows my mind. And you have just as much the synchronicity and the reason that Source Spirit brought us together is equally.
Yeah.
We've been building our platforms and bringing our knowledge and wisdom into the world together. And you've been an instrumental partner. Even though we did Truth Liberation together. So it was great, when in collaborating where I'd be like, you do the flyer, and I'd be like, okay, let's do the words, and I could give it back to you and you do something. We just made the creation process so much more fun, and we can share with each other as we're building our own individual platforms and get to do things like, thank you for inviting me so much onto your amazing podcast. I feel very blessed to be here and letting me talk about the things I love talking about.
Yes.
We're all doing this together. You know?
Well, and that's the whole point, I think, of why this podcast had to come out. I've been wanting to do it for years, but this all of a sudden, it's like it just bing, bong, boom came together because I shifted something in my mind where I said, all right, I'm done with this. Who has a podcast that can help me do this? What do I need to do? I need someone, I'm going to pay them whatever it is, a couple $100 to get this thing going because it's blocking my energy and it needs to flow. And this is the year of collaboration. I really deeply feel that, where the partnerships and the alliances and exactly what you talked about, where we inspire each other and it's fun to do it. Like, how many nights have you been awake doing your work on this, on your modules? And I've been doing my own thing. It's like, oh my God, like it's so much more fun to do it when you have just somebody else there to riff off of, or you feel supported in deeper ways. And I really think that this is the year for the collaboration, just in so many different ways. So
it's funny because I was like, you're my playmate. I'm like, playmate has an interesting connotation. Let's reclaim playmate for women.
I love it. I love it. That's so funny. I love it. All right. So, okay. But to get back into why I wanted you to come on to this podcast is when we were talking before we kicked off this episode, I'm like, I really want to have the information to convince people. You know what I mean? And she's like, oh, are you sure you want to say convince? I know that it's not that I want to convince anybody, because I feel like the people listening to this don't need to be convinced. You're already this far into this episode for a reason. But, and Naada was sharing when she was growing up in New York that she had so many people around her, doctors, lawyers, and all these kind of things, and she's going into consciousness, that she had to have the ability to really share from that part of your mind that needs that.
I grew up, I shared a little bit. So I had vast capacity to my extrasensory abilities. They shut down, but they always started to open up. At a certain point, I became more excited about reopening them. And I'd start to talk about things like, my spirit guides told me to do this. And then everyone just told me I was woo and looked at me like I was like nutso. So, and I grew up in New York, which is a very intellectual city. So, like everyone asked me, are you from California? I'm like, no, I grew up in New York City. I was always needing to prove my existence for a long time. I just didn't talk about it. So this is what I call my own process of coming out of the spiritual closet. I hid so much of what I perceived, or if someone asked me again, like the example of like, where did you figure out, to come on this ski trip? And I'm like, well, my spirit guides told me to. Mm-hmm. Or if I tell someone something I know, they're like, how do you know that? And instead of saying, well, I saw it in your aura, or I can see it, feel it in your energy field, I just say, I come up with some excuse to cover up my abilities. And at a certain point I realized that's not doing a service to myself, and it's definitely not doing a service to anybody else, because this is my reality and everyone has the opportunity to do that. And I'm playing into the game that I'm not even a fan of by playing this role of, I don't see this, I don't feel this, I don't talk to these beings because you think they're not real. It's very funny. I'll just share a quick story that I was dating a guy who totally, I don't know where he stands on it now, but this is many years ago, doesn't believe in anything non-physical. And at some point, we've been dating each other for quite a few months. I said, hey, so you don't believe in anything non-physical. I make my living talking to people's spirit guides. that makes me crazy. I'm a crazy person in your paradigm of reality, and you're dating me. So how do you reconcile that, you know? And it was just so funny. He's like, oh, I don't know. Maybe you just had some traumatic things happen to you in your childhood.
Oh, he
But
explained away your side rather than explaining why he was attracted to you.
yeah, I mean,
Because he
it
was
just
attracted to that whole the whole element of who you
exactly.
are, but he's saying, "Oh, maybe you had a problem." It's like, "No, no.
He was
I'm
surrounded
willing
by
to look."
so many spiritual people. It's unbelievable
Yeah.
walking around that that's not real. It's just funny.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's the best example, that I can say. So I invite people, and I still see it. I'm back in New York now. I was in LA for many years. I just moved back to New York for a bit, and walking around, and like I pointed out, I went to dinner, and I know a lot of very successful people here. And I went to a dinner with some lawyers and some financial people, and one of them sat down, and she was like, the reason I just said the pandemic is just that pause caused a lot of people to stop the
Yeah.
trajectory and the momentum of the path that they were on. Just like,
Mhm.
okay, well, this is how life goes, and this is what I do, and this is how I feel good about myself, and realize, like, am I even happy? Do I want to do
Mhm.
this? Oh, wait, what? I just spent a bunch of time at home with my family, and now I can meditate. Maybe these are things I would like to have more of in my life, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to replug, into that system. I'm actually taking my sovereignty and my power back and saying, yeah, no, I'm not giving all my life power to a corporation to create for you. These are my boundaries and my standards, and you're going to need to start creating towards me if you want me to participate in that and creating with you.
Right.
And so we were sitting at the dinner, and she's like, it's really weird. But I'm really into like spiritual stuff. And I really stop people and say, stop saying it's weird. It's not weird.
Mhm.
It is weird
Mhm.
only because weird actually means supernatural, just so you all
Mhm.
know. But it's not. Like, we're all still coming out of this apology for
Yeah.
being spiritual beings and having a desire to actually explore our intuition and know ourselves beyond what we've been told we can do. And stop doing it. That's I lovingly invite you to
Stop doing it.
stop doing it. If people don't want to believe you, great. That's their
Right.
issue. How come you have to live into their reality? If
Right.
you are living your life and speaking about your experiences based on someone else's comfort zone, you're letting them create your reality.
Mhm.
In coming out of the spiritual closet, in growing up in New York City and being called woo woo, I didn't have to do anything. Nobody has to do anything, but I became very motivated to prove to people that I knew what I was talking about in a logical way. It could have been anything, like whether I was saying, yeah, I'm doing energy healing now. And people are like, energy, some energy. And I'd say, well, actually, if you look at the Vedic texts or you go back to China, the reality is that humanity has been talking about and cultivating energy for the majority of our history. And only since the Industrial Revolution, when I believe they consciously wrote magic out of our
Right.
collective story, have we not been utilizing it?
Mhm.
So, like, these are the kinds of discussions I like to have with people. And now, even in that very, 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 very short period of time that we have not been addressing the energy of the universe, already the 1920s came around, they discovered, quantum physics. So now even the things that science was trying to disprove in quote unquote spirituality,
Right.
science already has recirculated in less than 200 years, basically
Mhm.
back to, oh, okay, actually it is. You guys are all right.
Right,
you know?
right, right, right. It's
So
cool too because in that you see sort of, and I get this sense sometimes too, you can't keep a lid on it. Sometimes I get really bummed out about what I see. And I was laying outside yesterday. It was dose day for our psilocybin group. I was laying outside on the ground and I went somewhere really quiet and I was just laying there looking up at the clouds and I was just like taking it in and really feeling like I needed to just get away from all the noise and ruckus. So I went to this place and it was great. And I look up in the sky and, there's a freaking plane dropping a chemtrail right over my
mhm,
head. You know what I mean? And I'm
mhm.
like, God damn it, we're messing this up. And I felt just like the huge heaviness of like, we are messing this up. I feel that sometimes, like, wow, we are fucking this up. But at the same time, things like what you just said, I do feel that too, where it's like, you can't keep a lid on this. There's no way. Like it comes up anyhow. It sorts out. There's that balance there.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's a whole nother podcast here,
Mhm.
and it could bring up a lot of stuff for people. So I'll just preface that. You know what? Let me put it this way. I had someone say to me, and I don't know where this number came from. We have 244, put whatever
Souls.
number you want there, soul mates,
Mm.
or people in our soul group that we incarnate with. And half of them are on the light and half of them are on the dark. And the ones that are on the light side are the ones that are there to like teach you lessons by uplifting you and holding your hand and being your cheerleader and like loving you. And the half that are on the dark side are the ones that are there to equally, because we come here to learn as souls, teach you by beating you over the head and oppressing your consciousness and putting poison in your food. So if we look at it that way, I feel like it's more inclusive of going back to understanding, and this is a practice that I have, is coming out of that polarity, that there's a bad guy in physics, that if I create a force, an opposite force of equal or greater value will push back.
Right.
So this is sort of like what I think of as ninjutsu spirituality or ninjutsu evolution. If we think of judo, like how do we work with energy to just like, I'm going to fight them. And some people, that's their purpose.
Yeah.
However, if we just sort of pull out to a larger perspective, there are people who have benefited. And, we just look at imperialism by exploiting resources, and those resources can be minerals. Those resources can be plants, people. I just really want people to get this. The people who have conquered the world are the ones who have designed the systems we're living in.
Right.
They've designed our educational systems, and they designed those to their benefit. To go find the smartest kids that they could then pick out and use to build their corporations, and that's more recent. But if we really do look at the history of our world and this concept of imperial, it's not a conspiracy that some people have used their power to benefit themselves. It's that simple. In our known history, the very short one that we all think of, like maybe we've been on the world for 6,000 to 10,000 years. In that course of time, right now, we're the most connected with technology. More people can read than ever before. Right. So there's more ability to transmit information. Right. It used to be only the aristocrats who had the ability to read, and we're going around the world, getting all the documents from all the places and hoarding them, information and disinformation. More decentralized. We're looking at actually humanity. The way I look at it is humanity and or consciousness moving from a more centralized organizational structure into a more decentralized organizational structure.
Yeah. And it's the information and the disinformation. And so, I always feel like that when you have this much information and you have this much information that could be true or untrue, you have to come back to your truth and you have to feel that truth in your body. And that's why more now than ever before, you've got to feel and find your own way forward. I love everything that you just shared about how the negative isn't bad always, right? Like as I was sitting out there, the next thought that came after, like, oh my God, we're messing this up. I just kind of rolled with it and I let it happen and experienced the sort of depravity of what I was feeling, like, oh my God, this is so terrible. Like, what are we doing? And I was just like, hang on a second. Like, let's lean into it a little bit more. What is this? This is pressure that's causing you to feel a certain way, and it's causing you to make a change to your life. Could this perhaps not be just bad, but be a teacher for you? Earth School is not meant to be a sunshiny place and just all happy. What would we learn here? Why would our soul have come back just to sit in the sun all day and feel great? We came back to a body as a soul to do some work, to grow towards our mastery. And you're not going to do that, eating truffles by the pool all day. You have to see, on that day when you're feeling all that pressure, you have to look up and see the chemtrail airplane going by or whatever, because it needs to infiltrate every single cell of your body so that you feel it in the deepest way. So it makes the changes in the deepest way. And that's really beautiful. Not always fun, obviously, but.
No, not always fun. And it's all our perspective. I mean, you could choose to say that, hey, this is fun too. When I'm feeling the deepest, sensation that I might identify as despair, I'm alive and I get to feel it. So it's fun.
Well, and that element. And I think another thing that's really shifted for me too is doing it with a tribe. Really coming together with community is so important. And we can kind of laugh about it. It's just so beautiful to come together in that community and to share the experiences and to normalize it and to lessen the isolation of what you feel and to, I don't know, just make it more normal. I don't want to say to feel superior. Like it's not, I do sometimes go through, in all honesty, this superiority thing where I'm like, I have mastered this. Look at all these peons of where I used to be when I just thought that I was here just to look good and weigh a certain amount of weight and make a certain amount of money. Ha ha ha. Look where I am now.
I
And,
love you.
generally I'll be knocked out at the knees and be in that same
We all
spot the
go
next
through
day.
it. It's one of
But,
the stages. I am Jesus here to save the world, the Messiah. There's a reason they have the term
gather
Messiah
around.
complex.
Gather around. I have something
Oh,
to share.
God.
But when I go through those things, it really is, it's really interesting just to balance it out and to see it all from all the perspectives. It's such a fun, wild ride,
It is. I mean, it's said over and over again about people taking the power. The people have the power.
Mm.
And we are very disempowered. And
Mm-hmm.
I really just want to kind of turn, one of the most inspiring things for me right now is watching what's happening in Iran. We have
Totally.
girls who are 12 years old, younger, who are going, I'd rather die than live in this structure of reality, and it does take that. If you like I said, if you let other people create your reality, they'll create your reality.
Completely.
And we don't know who they are. And it would be
Yeah.
wonderful if everyone who is creating your reality was like, let's plant flowers that are all organic. Right. It's just not what's happening at the current moment. So we do get to, and that's also why I title my program Empower. When people really get that you are the creator of your reality and you're seeing things you would no longer like to be feeding your life force into, you have to stop being in passive denial that these things are happening. So it's this very interesting dance. Yes, I'm learning, and it's part of my soul growth to see those chemtrails. But I also have the option of going, I'm going to pretend like that's not happening, even though I realize when they're going through the air, I'm coughing more, Oh, it must be allergies or whatever, all these kids are being born with autism now at alarming rates. But I mean, is it the chemicals that we're putting into their body from the medical industry, from the food industry, from dumping into the air? The amount of aluminum coming in the air now from those chemtrails is crazy.
Yeah, and what I think you're saying isn't it's not like you're bypassing it. It's like you're just saying, I choose today to hold my power. I know these things, but I also know that what I'm doing is more potent when I'm not necessarily distracted by all this ruckus.
Well, what I look at is, again, and this is, I don't know if it's the opening of all of your podcasts, but in one of your podcasts, you reference Marianne Williamson, who is, I really love her. I contributed a massive amount of money to her campaign when she was running for the president. And I'm going to just say here, I am going to support her again, that she's considering running again.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
I'm letting people know because she was destroyed. They just wiped her out immediately and made her make her look like a quack. And she's highly intelligent. And there's very few people who have a spiritual integration who are willing to step into the political realm.
I absolutely love her. She gives me goosebumps every single time I hear her say anything.
She's the one where I actually learned this concept from originally, which is passive denial versus active denial. And passive denial is putting your blinders on and going, oh my God, I don't want to deal with this. I can't see it. No. It's not happening. Active denial is actually allowing yourself to go, wow, those chemtrails are happening. And it makes me feel sad that there's poison being put into our air and that the rain has become toxic. And I don't know where I can put my kids where they can even get fresh air anymore on the planet.
Yeah.
And choosing, I will no longer actively give my life force to creating this reality. And this is also a Buckminster Fuller concept of build the world that you choose to live in rather than fighting the old system. So it's redirecting. And when I reference, people are saying, I'm not going to work for that corporation. I'm not, you are literally, an organization is legally considered an entity. That entity cannot live if you are not giving it life force. It is the people that show up and feed their life force that makes that thing alive. And as more and more of us start unplugging our life force and working our lives away for these other entities and start to take autonomy and sovereignty back and come to either by ourselves and or collaboratively start to create new entities, we create a new world. And we're now actively rechanneling our life force from those things we no longer want to see in the world.
I love it. I mean, so the point about the entity, I work for a corporation. I'm still in corporate America, and I don't always feel the best about it. You know what I mean? Like contributing to everything that you just said, the corporate greed and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, what I do with every single bonus that I make is put it into KLZ method. And so to some degree, and during COVID, I would donate money to whatever with, bonuses and stuff like that. And so I feel like I'm a filter of this money that then goes into something that is shifting it, like money laundering it into some degree. You know what I mean? Energetically laundering what they're doing in some kind of way for now. So it's like what you said. I love that passive active
Yeah.
bypassing, or however you say
So
it.
can I speak to what you shared?
Yeah.
I think like emotions that can come up for us as humans are guilt and shame. So if
Mm-hmm.
I say like, why are you, and I'm not about those emotions, and I'm fully that your energy is how you direct it. It's not the actual action you're taking. It's the how consciously you're utilizing that energy behind the action. To totally unplug from one reality into another would probably cause most people a brain schism,
Mm-hmm.
right? To suddenly say, okay, you know what? F this system. I'm never working here. You've lived your entire life understanding that money is your source and
Yeah.
survival. To suddenly
Mm-hmm.
unplug and think you can be so connected to source and manifest, which you can, but you got to learn how to do it. I'm not going to say, okay, I'm going to become an Olympic runner and suddenly go to the Olympics. There's like a process to get there,
Right.
right?
Right.
And conditions. So we understand that stepping into a corporation for so many of us who are still being sustained by the jobs that we are working that may not be as aligned with us now as we're shifting our perspective and where we want to be aligning our life force,
Mm-hmm.
going in there and feeling guilt or shame of like, oh, I don't really want to be here isn't actually our most empowered way of approaching it.
Mm-hmm.
Going in and recognizing that you being yourself
Yeah.
already transitioning is consciously and unconsciously giving other people that you're around permission to do the same. The
I
role
love
that
it.
you're playing is very important right now in the transition. As more of us, I never plugged into corporate world, but those people who are there, who are transitioning and starting to have, like, if you literally sitting down at lunch with someone who
Yep.
maybe hasn't been exposed to Kundalini and
Yeah.
having that conversation is part of your life purpose, just to wrap it
Mm-hmm.
up as we could keep talking, but when we come back to our purpose, I really want to remind people to pull away from your purpose as a title or a one thing. Your
Yeah.
purpose is to smile at someone
Yep.
when you open the door and brighten their day up.
Yeah.
That
It's
could be your
totally
purpose
true.
in that moment.
We had an intern group come in last year, and it's all these 22-year-old kids, and I'm 44 exactly, so it was really funny because they had been sitting in this room being talked to for 2 days or something, and I'm coming in to talk to them about advanced derivatives and what our team does and all these kind of things, and just the energy of them. They're like, oh, like it was after lunch, they're slumped over, and so I just had to switch it. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to even get anything in through their heads in this kind of way. So I just talked to them for a second about burnout. Like, you're 22, I'm 44. I've lived twice your life. And I tell you what, you guys, you're going to have great careers. You're in a great place, but you've got to know how to manage the burnout. And I'm going to teach you a breath work. And it all came to me. I had not yet integrated how to be my spiritual self in my corporate space. I'd always kept them split, but I literally was hearing, you've got to teach them a breath work like 20 minutes before. So I had no time to plan anything. So I just went in and I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I trust the guidance. And I taught them this breath work. And it was so funny. Afterwards, one of these kids said, oh my gosh, that was so great. I felt like this and that. And I never, are there more of these? Because sometimes I can't sleep. Is there one for that? It was just so amazing. I'm like, we take it for granted almost, or we don't realize sometimes the things that we have access to that are just so normal to us. And like you said, when we really shine our light in the truest way, other people are able to kind of absorb that. And I feel like that might have been something that is exactly what you're, you know, detailing.
It's
So it's cool.
all divine.
Mm-hmm.
As we embody that divinity and know ourselves as that divinity, we
Mm-hmm.
just become vessels for it. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter where you're doing your work. The work gets to be done everywhere in a massive earth transformation.
Yeah.
There are light workers in corporations, light worker is an interesting term.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
everyone understands what I mean when I say that, because there's
Mm-hmm.
shadow work too, right? We don't want to only be doing light work.
Yeah.
But there are healers, however you want to think of it. Maybe you think of yourself as a shaman or a wizard or a witch or a sorceress, or a sage,
Yeah.
yogini, however that is. I mean, one thing that I'm very actually excited about living in LA, there's like, you go to an event, it's like, hi, I'm Shaman Tom and I'm Shaman Mary. And I've had people be like, can everyone be a shaman? And like, I said to her, as she was rolling her eyes, whoever shaman introduced themselves to us, I said to this woman, look, there are really good lawyers and there are really bad lawyers in our world. I'm just happy that this generation wants one, knows the word shaman, and
Mm-hmm.
two, that they all want to be shamans.
Mm-hmm. Same thing with coaches. I feel like everyone's like annoyed by how many coaches there are. Oh, there's so many life coaches. It's like, that's a great thing though, because whatever you need a coach for, there's that flavor of coach. We're all coaches. We've all had some experience that we can share with somebody else in our own way that will resonate deeper than if the best coach, Tony Robbins or whoever the heck you want to consider the best known coach, came in and shared it in their way just because of the experiences. So
and moving out again of that conditioning of capitalism, there's no best coach. There are good coaches for everything. And like you said so beautifully, we all have something to teach. We're all leaders. We're starting with leading ourselves and then sharing what we've learned with others. That's how we grow and becoming each other's mentors. Some of us are called to there's a reason so many people are moving out and coming into teaching online, whatever. You could be teaching how to be a carpenter. You could be teaching piano lessons, but finding their passions and sharing them with the people that want. We have more than enough people to support ourselves in a livelihood, and quite a good livelihood, by just finding a few hundred people that like what we're doing in the world and want to support us.
Well, and even further, like what I think is really cool too, is when you are sharing what you've learned from a place of, okay, I've learned this, I do have mastery on it, I'm going to share this. It's fantastic. But what I've really been kind of stepping into lately is sharing while you're in the journey still. So many times I'm in something and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't share this yet. I don't have my head wrapped around it yet. But there's a really beautiful way to share that experience. And it really resonates deeply when you're being that authentic with, I don't know what the hell's happening to me right now. You're worrying like, I don't want to share this. I haven't solved it yet. What if someone calls me crazy? And what if they're right? Maybe they are right. Because I do feel kind of crazy right now. The situation hasn't completely, come full circle where I can get my arms wrapped around it or whatever. But there's a really beautiful way of sharing when you're in that space, or 2 seconds out of it, or have the mastery. Like there's all kinds of different ways to offer that. So
there's always more to learn. I have so many extraordinary people in my life. I mean, just brilliant astrologers, healers. I cannot begin to tell you how many of them are like, oh, should I teach? I'm going to I'm like, more about this than anybody I've ever met in my entire life. And they still don't feel like they know enough to go out and teach. I mean, that's another complex as well. I would invite people to share what you know, and also remember to be humble. Like we also have this facade that we think in our branding that we're very much pushed that we have to be the expert.
Right.
Don't pretend to be an expert in something if you're not. There is, and actually you and I have spoke about this before, and it's something I'm passionate about. I don't think we have not learned how to live in harmony with our elders in the West. We kind of shove them into homes and don't deal with them. And indigenous cultures, lineage is very important, and learning from your elders and respecting your elders and understanding, where you're learning, where it comes from, and always being humble, to know that there is always more to learn and to understand the roots of what you're teaching and where it comes from, and to be responsible and like really doing the research and really learning. If you feel called to teach something, really learn it, and you may still be on the first year. I remember when I made my first flyer, I started with Reiki at 18. I'm like, I do Reiki. And then I saw a flyer next to me. I'm like, this lady's been teaching for 25 years. And now I'm the person that's been teaching for 25 years. I've accumulated a massive amount of knowledge. If I hadn't started with I just got my Reiki certificate, I wouldn't be where I am now.
I love it. So grateful that you are, I'm so grateful that you took it all the way. It's amazing. Your story's so cool.
I love you.
I love you
Thank
too.
you for bringing me on here.
Yes, for sure. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. It was so fun to just record this, and any of our conversations are always so good. If you are feeling called to work with Naada, she has her one-on-one 3-month sacred container called In Power, to align with your sovereignty, step out of the matrix, and consciously create the life you came here to live. You can also reach her on Instagram. Her handle is @NaadaMas. naada.mas. This is the last of the winter season interviews. We've had some really beautiful ladies on here this season sharing their story and their background and their offerings as well. So it's been so beautiful to bring their stories to light, and the magic is already happening. I'll share more on this in a wrap-up of the winter season out next week. Just a quick summary of everything that's transpired in these last couple of months and a little bit more on the magic that's already starting to happen from the Living on Purpose podcast. It's so cool when we put these things out and then they start to really reflect and do what we always felt that they would. It's really, really just so much fun. I can't wait to share it. In the meantime, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, click yes to all the notifications for the Living on Purpose podcast. Share your favorite episodes with a friend or someone that you think would really resonate with some of the topics. Thanks again for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.